A very good morning to each and every one of you. It's such a pleasure that we are able to be gathered here this morning. So good to see members from East Side as well as Jurong. I'm so happy that you'll be able to be with us today. I hope that you have learned much from Ernest's lesson earlier concerning modesty, God's standard for modesty. And now we'll be discussing a related topic, which is, does God have anything to say about our dressing for worship? No, it's possible that we do dress differently for different occasions and still be modest. For example, when we go out to the shopping mall, we might wear jeans and a t-shirt. It's modest. When we are meeting with our friends, we may maybe wear something a little nicer, right? Something maybe smart casual attire. Still modest. But how should we dress for worship? Right? Could our dressing be modest and yet still be inappropriate for worship? Does it even matter to God how we dress for worship? Does God have anything to say concerning our standards of attire in the worship assembly? And so these are things that we want to consider in our second session for this morning, dressing for worship. We begin first with the definition of the word worship. The word worship in the Bible, proskuneo in the Greek, it literally means to kiss towards, right? Pros, towards, and kuneo, to kiss. So to kiss towards. And what this conveys is an idea of reverence, paying homage to someone, glorifying someone, honoring someone. And so we worship deity, we worship God, we kiss towards, we revere Him, honor Him with our worship. And so our attitude in worship is equally important as what we do in worship or the actions that we do in worship. We're familiar with this passage coming from John chapter 4 and verse 24, which says that God is a spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. Most of us, in fact, probably all of us, are familiar with the in truth part. Right? What is truth? Jesus said in John 17:17, sanctify them by thy truth, thy word is truth. And so we are very familiar that when we worship, we should go to the New Testament for our authority. But the spirit matters as well. In spirit and in truth, our attitude, our demeanor, the way in which we approach God's great throne, it matters. Our dressing for worship reflects our attitude as well. And so what kind of attitude should we have when we worship God? I'd like to point you to a passage in Psalm 89 and verse 7. Let's turn to Psalm 89 and verse 7, which reads, God is greatly to be feared in the assembly of the saints and to be had in reverence of all them that are about Him. And so this word here, feared, is to hold something in awe or someone in awe. You are in awe of God. We fear Him. We revere Him. We respect Him. So this is the attitude with which we worship God. Our dressing needs to revere God. Our dressing for worship, that is, it should revere God. Our dressing for worship should reflect local customs. Our dressing for worship must respect the eldership of the church. And so in the next half an hour or so, we'll discuss these 3 points: revere, reflect, as well as respect. We begin with the first point, reverence for God. Our dressing for worship must revere God. And so we understand that how we dress reflects our attitude, our demeanor, our disposition, our reverence for God, or lack thereof. For example, let's go to the book of Exodus, chapter 3 and verse 5. In Exodus chapter 3 and verse 5, Moses, he sees the burning bush. And the Lord spake to Moses out of the midst of the bush, Exodus 3 verse 4, and in verse 5, the Lord said, draw not nigh hither, put off thy shoes from off thy feet. Take off your shoes, for the place whereon thou standest is holy ground. And so Moses' dressing or attire mattered to God. Let's look at another passage in Exodus chapter 19, verses 9 through 11. And so the exodus out of Egypt has already occurred. They have already crossed over the Red Sea. They are now at the base of Mount Sinai. And what did the Lord tell Moses? Exodus 19, verse 9. The Lord said unto Moses, Lo, I come unto thee in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with thee, and believe thee forever. And Moses told the words of the people unto the Lord. Notice verse 10. The Lord said unto Moses, Go unto the people and sanctify them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their clothes and be ready again against the third day. For the third day the Lord will come down in the sight of all the people upon Mount Sinai. And so the people were to wash their clothes to prepare for the Lord coming down. And so let's think about Exodus chapter 3, when Moses appeared before the burning bush. And the Lord told him, Put off thy shoes, take off your shoes. What kind of attitude would Moses have communicated to God if he said, Well, I like my shoes. The ground is quite stony and sandy. I don't want to take off my shoes. What kind of attitude would he have shown to God? Surely not that of reverence. What about the people at the base of Mount Sinai when the Lord told Moses to tell the people they need to wash their clothes, prepare for the Lord? What if someone had said, Well, I don't want to wash my clothes. I like my clothes when they have been broken in. When I've worn them, they're comfortable. I don't want to wash them. Wouldn't it have communicated an attitude of disrespect, of disobedience instead of reverence? And so our dressing for worship communicates our attitude to God. We sometimes want to dress, in fact, all the time we want to dress comfortably. All right. See, Singapore is such a hot place. We want to dress comfortably. We want to wear something that is easy to put on. No need to iron. Right? And quickly throw on something in the morning and get out of the house. But when I worship God, these considerations should be far down the list of priorities. My first thought, first and foremost, should be, does my dressing reflect an attitude of reverence toward God? And so what kind of attire, what kind of dressing will revere God? Is there a passage in the scriptures that says, Thus saith the Lord, you must wear this, and that? Now, some of you may be shaking your heads. Surely there is no passage in the New Testament that says that when we come before the Lord to worship, we must wear this, and that. And you would be right. But the Lord does have something to say on the matter. And that brings us to our second point, which is that our dressing in worship ought to reflect local customs. It ought to adhere to local customs. God wants, we will look at a passage in a moment's time in 1 Corinthians 11, 3-16. In this passage, we are going to see that God, speaking through the Apostle Paul, he's going to tell the church at Corinth that your attire in worship needs to reflect local customs. That is, your dressing needs to conform to what society considers appropriate. Of course, God has an standard of modesty, which Ernest has elaborated on earlier. And so if local customs contradict God's standard of modesty, we adhere to God's standard of modesty. But if local customs do not contradict God's standard of modesty, then God requires us to reflect it in our dressing. God requires us to adhere to local customs when we dress up for worship. And so let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verses 3-16. 1 Corinthians chapter 11, 3-16. Verse 3. But I would have you know that the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. And so here Paul lists out the hierarchy. The woman is subject to the man is subject to Christ. Christ, although he is divine, he is subject to God the Father. Verse 4. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, that is his physical head covered, dishonoreth his head, that is Christ. If he were to cover his head in Corinth while praying, he would dishonor Christ. Verse 5. But every woman that prayeth or prophesieth with her head uncovered, dishonoreth her head, for that is that is even all one as if she were shaven. Verse 6, for if the woman be not covered, let her also be shorn or shaven, right? But if it be a shame for a woman to be shorn or shaven, let her be covered. Verse 7, for a man indeed ought not to cover his head, for as much as he is the image and glory of God, but the woman is the glory of the man. For the man is not of the woman, but the woman of the man. Neither was the woman created for the woman, neither was the man created for the woman, rather, but the woman for the man. Verse 10, for this cause ought the woman to have power on her head because of the angels. Nevertheless, neither is the man without the woman, neither the woman without the man in the Lord. For as the woman is of the man, even so is the man also by the woman, but all things of God. Verse 13, notice very interesting. Judge in yourselves. That is to say, in some translations, judge for yourselves. Is it comely or seemly? Is it appropriate that a woman prays to God uncovered? Doth not even nature itself teach you that if a man have long hair, it is a shame unto him? But if a woman have long hair, it is a glory to her, for her hair is given her for a covering. If any man seems to be contentious, we have no such custom, neither the churches of God. Now, I know it's a long passage. There's much that can be discussed about it. This is unfortunately not a lesson on the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 11. But we want to look at certain points. We want to understand that Corinthian customs in the mid-1st century AD, Corinth was a city in the southern portion of Greece, modern-day Greece. In the mid-1st century AD, what was the custom? That the man does not cover their head when praying. 1 Corinthians 11 verse 4. Contrariwise, what did the woman do? The woman in Corinth they do cover their heads when praying. 1 Corinthians 11 and verse 5. And so we understand that customs change based on time and place. What is the norm in a particular place at a particular time? Years later, in a different place, in a different time, customs change, norms evolve. Regarding the custom of veil wearing, look at the book of Genesis chapter 38, verse 14 and 15. Genesis 38, verse 14 and 15. This would be the 18th century BC, when Judah, the fourth son of Jacob, right? And so he sees his daughter-in-law, and it's a very interesting account. You can read it for yourself, but he has promised his daughter-in-law his son to basically the first son dies, and so the daughter-in-law marries the second son dies as well, and so the third son, Judah promises, but does not follow through with it. And so Tamar, that's his daughter-in-law's name. In verse 14, she put her widow's garment off from her, covered her with a veil, wrapped herself, sat in an open place, which is by the way to Timnath, for she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to wife. Look at verse 15. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be an harlot because she had covered her face. And so the custom in Canaan in the 18th century BC is that if you are wearing a veil, the inference is that you are a prostitute, you are a harlot. Contrariwise, if you are not wearing a veil, in the 1st century AD in Corinth, then you are someone who is rebellious, dishonorable, you dishonor your head. You are a woman who is contentious, you are a woman who has no respect for authority. And so we see that customs change and evolve based on time and place. But Paul says that Paul gives the instruction, right? If the woman prays without covering her head, she dishonors her head. And so the injunction, the command is to adhere or reflect local customs in our dressing. And so that's food for thought. We need to think about whether our dressing matches local customs and norms. Because after all, in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 13, Paul said, judge for yourselves. Judge in yourselves in the King James. In the ESV, judge for yourselves. And so the Corinthians could use their own thinking, could use their own observation of the situation around them. Judge for yourself. Is it appropriate for a woman to pray unto God uncovered? And so they were to observe local customs, they were to observe local norms, and adhere to them insofar as it does not contradict God's standard of modesty. So let's ask ourselves some questions. What are the local customs concerning attire or dress in this part of the world, in Singapore? Well, if there's an important occasion, like for example, a job interview, we would usually dress upwards. For example, if you do your research and you see that, well, the majority of the people in this office, their usual wear is a shirt and pants for the men. For your interview, you probably put on a shirt, pants, and you add on a tie, you dress upwards. If the custom in that office is for people to maybe wear smart casual, maybe a polo tee with jeans, for your interview, you'll probably wear a shirt and pants. You would dress upward because you want to respect the occasion. You want to get the job, right? For a wedding, right? A wedding, it's an important occasion. And so usually we dress upwards again. Sad to say that many people, sometimes they do not bother to dress upwards, and they will just come for the wedding, perhaps a jeans and a t-shirt. But generally, people in this part of the world, they will put on, for the men, a shirt and a pants, sometimes even a shirt, pants, and a tie for the wedding. For the ladies, they would wear, they'll take out a dress. They will not wear something that they are going to wear to the market. They're going to wear something that is presentable. An important occasion, local customs and norms say that we dress upwards. If we are meeting an important person, if tomorrow you say that, well, you get to meet the Prime Minister, Lee Hsien Loong, would we be going to meet him in a t-shirt and jeans? Probably not. Even if it is a casual occasion, you would still put on something presentable. You would dress upwards. That's local custom and norms. You match the occasion, you match the person you are meeting. If need be, you need to dress upwards depending on the importance of the occasion or the importance of the person. Is not the worship assembly the most important thing or the most important occasion, so to speak, that we do? Is not coming for the assembly the most important thing? On the first day of the week, when we come together, we are worshiping God, revering Him. Isn't this an important occasion? Is not God Himself the most important person, again, inverted commas, so to speak? Not to say that He's a man like you and me, but is not God the most important being in our lives? When we come before His presence, He is important, and we ought to respect and revere Him. And we want to adhere to local customs to say that when we come before someone important, when we go to an important occasion, our dress needs to match. Our dress needs to be, we dress upwards, so to speak. A caveat I'd like to mention is 1 Timothy 2, 9 and 10. Sometimes I keep mentioning the phrase dress upwards, you're dressing more presentably. Of course, we don't want to go the other extreme. Ernest has already presented to us in 1 Timothy 2, 9 and 10. But I think it will be worthwhile to read this passage again, 1 Timothy 2, 9 and 10. In like manner also, that women adorn themselves in modest apparel with shamefacedness and sobriety, not with broidered hair, or gold, or pearls, or costly array, but which becometh women professing godliness with good works. And so when we say dress upwards, we are not saying that, well, you go to whole hog and start to put on, all your bling bling and all your fancy hairdo, and we're not saying that. But we are saying dress in a manner befitting the occasion, befitting the person, the being whom we are coming to worship. What if we cannot decide on what this attire should be? Because after all, we have said that local customs, they evolve with place, they evolve with time. Even in Singapore, if we wind the clock back to my parents' generation, people who work in offices, they would wear a shirt and pants for the men. Ladies, they would wear a dress. Increasingly, we are seeing that, more and more firms, they allow casual dress. For example, casual Fridays. You can wear smart casual. But now casual Friday seems to be casual Fridays every day. And so around the clock, you can wear something casual, polo tee and jeans. And so some places say that, well, you wear a shirt and pants in the office. Some officers say that, well, you can wear a polo tee and jeans. Some people are fine with going to a wedding in maybe jeans and a polo t-shirt. And some people say that, well, I still don't feel comfortable about this. I would prefer to wear a shirt and pants. And so we see that local custom evolves with time, and sometimes there is no agreement on what this attire or how we should dress for worship, because we have earlier mentioned that we want to revere God in our dressing. We want to revere God in our dressing, and our dressing should reflect local customs. But what if there is no conclusion as to what these local customs are? What if there are variations in local customs? And that brings us to our third and final point for today, that our dressing for worship should respect the elders as well. The elders of the church, the overseers, those who watch for the flock. We want to establish that the elders have been given authority by Jesus himself, the chief shepherd, to oversee and lead the flock. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 and following, 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 1 and following, what does Peter remind the elders? The elders which are among you I exhort. Peter is speaking. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder. And so Peter himself was an elder, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Feed the flock of God which is among you, taking the oversight thereof, not by constraint, but willingly, not of filthy lucre, but of a ready mind, neither as being lords over God's heritage, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd shall appear, this is Jesus Christ, you shall receive a crown of glory that fades not away. Notice what Peter reminds the elders in verse 2. Feed the flock. Take the oversight. And so the elders need to lead. The elders have the authority to lead in matters of expediency. What is a matter of expediency? Changing the day of worship is not a matter of expediency, because through the New Testament we understand the day of worship. We come to worship the Lord on the first day of the week. And so the elders do not have the authority to say, let's push it to a Saturday instead. Saturday is a better day. They don't have that kind of authority. But they have the authority in matters of expediency, where there is no black and white, so to speak. For example, what time do we start the worship service? Do we have 3 songs before the service, or do we have 4? Right? Do we have separate Bible classes for the children, or do we have everyone in one Bible class? And so they have the authority to decide in areas of expediency. One of the areas of expediency would be, what should the people coming for worship wear? How should the people serving at the Lord's table, how should they be attired? They would have the authority to decide these kind of things, because after all, in 1 Corinthians chapter 14 and verse 40, all things must be done decently and in order. In the worship assembly, we are not coming here to be entertained. We are not coming here to relax, but we are coming here to worship and to revere God. And Paul reminded the Corinthians that in the worship assembly, all things must be done decently and in order. And this would include how the people serving are dressed, how the members are dressed as well. This conveys an image of whether things are decent and in order. Imagine if the men serving at the Lord's table, someone came up here with a shirt, pants, and a tie. The next person comes up here in a polo t-shirt and a jeans. The next person comes up here in t-shirt and Bermudas. And so there is no order. Things are not done in a organized fashion or a decent fashion. Imagine if a visitor were to walk in and sees the members, well, everyone is dressed in a respectful and reverential manner. Maybe for the men, they are dressing like they would to meet the men and women are dressing like they would to meet a dignitary or an important person, like they would for a job interview. Then they will come away with the impression, these people they are respectful of God. They bother to dress up to worship their great God. Contrary-wise, imagine if a visitor were to walk in and say, well, some people are in respectful clothing as befitting something that they would wear to meet the Prime Minister, for example, or to go for a wedding, for example. But others are dressed very casually in Bermudas and slippers, or ripped jeans and a t-shirt. And so there is no order, there is no decency. Things are done in a messy fashion. And so the elders have the authority to lay down certain guidelines, to lay down certain instructions, to help things to be done in an orderly fashion. And what should we do? We need to submit to the authority of the elders. I know that some among us come from congregations where there are no elders. If there are no elders, then the men need to decide. The men need to lead and take charge and to decide on this issue. But when there are elders, when the church is scripturally organized, that's a good thing. They decide, and the members submit respectfully. Let's go to Hebrews chapter 13 and verse 17. Hebrews 13 and verse 17. What does the Hebrews writer remind the listeners? Obey them that have the rule over you. That's the elders. You need to obey them. Submit yourselves. Why? Not because the elders are bossing you around, not because the elders get a kick out of telling you what to do. No, because they watch for your souls, and they must give as they that must give account, that they may do it with joy and not with grief, for that is unprofitable for you. And so when the elders have to nag, so to speak, or when the elders have to chase you concerning your dressing, it grieves them. It is unprofitable for you. This is time that they could be spent doing other things, watching out for the weaker members of the flock, caring for others, counseling them. And so we want to reduce their workload, so to speak. If they have made a decision on this matter, we obey them, we submit, so that all things can be done decently and in order. And so I'd like you all to consider, what are we telling God when we do not respect the authority of the man that he has authorized to be put in place to lead the church? What are we telling God when we do not respect the authority of the elders? If we cannot respect the authority of the elders, who God has authorized to lead the church in matters of expediency, how can we submit to our great God himself? What message are we conveying? When the elders have made a decision, or when the elders have conveyed, say that this is how we prefer people to dress, so that things are decent and in order, and when we do not submit to this, are we truly revering and respecting God? And so I'd like to end off with a couple of food for thought. When we come for worship, am I prioritizing clothing that is comfortable, no need to iron, quickly can put on, over clothing that conveys reverence for God? Well, I'm not saying that clothing that is comfortable it's not going to be reverential, and that's not what I'm saying. But generally, right, it takes effort to press your clothing, press your dress, press your shirts. It takes a bit of thought and consideration. Does this clothing respect God? Does this clothing revere him? Or is it what I want to wear because later on I'm going for a barbecue, I want to dress down? Is my clothing conveying reverence for God? We want to ask ourselves, what are the local customs concerning our dress for important events? When we meet the Prime Minister, when we go for a wedding, how do people usually dress in your place or in your locality? If people bother to dress up for a wedding, to dress up to meet an important dignitary, surely we should dress in a decent fashion, in a presentable fashion, to come to the assembly before our great God. And if there is no conclusion, maybe there is variations in customs, even in a certain location, have the elders made any judgment on this? Have they said, well, this is what is expedient, we're going to choose this, and we're going to stick to this? Do we respect what the elders have to say? Our dressing for worship should revere God. Our dressing for worship should reflect local customs concerning important events, important people. Our dressing for worship should respect the authority of the elders. Thank you.